Nurse Evelyn Shaw stood in the emergency corridor in her graduation whites, while the applause from the ceremony died behind her like a door being shut. Colonel Victor Harlan held her badge between two fingers, high enough for every intern, doctor, and visitor to see. "You're fired," he said, and the first laugh came from the front row of graduates, still wearing their blue ribbons. Evelyn did not reach for the badge. She only looked past him toward the ER doors, where a patient's chart had been left open beside a sealed file stamped with one black word, "Restored." Someone had slipped that file under her name card before the ceremony began. Someone wanted the truth found. But if Evelyn opened it, the secret she had buried for 12 years might destroy the one person she had promised to protect. Before we go deeper, tell us where you're watching from in the comments, because stories of forgotten honor belong to every country and every family. And if you believe quiet people sometimes carry the heaviest service, subscribe and stay with us until the final salute. The graduation ceremony at St. Anselm Veterans Medical Center had never been held so close to the ER before. Usually, the hospital pinned its new nurses in the old auditorium, beneath flags and polished photographs of directors who had died before most of the graduates were born. But that morning, the auditorium ceiling had flooded after a pipe burst, and the ceremony had been moved into the wide corridor between the emergency department and the teaching wing. Rows of folding chairs lined the walls. Families sat with flowers in their laps. New nurses stood in pressed white coats, their names printed on cards at the edge of a long table. Beyond the glass doors, the ER moved with the restless rhythm of a place that never truly celebrated anything. Monitors sounded in distant rooms. Wheels rolled. Voices lowered. Rose vanished. Evelyn Shaw had asked twice if the ceremony should be postponed. No one listened. At 39, Evelyn was older than most of the graduating class. She had finished the hospital's civilian transition program after years away from formal nursing. To the younger graduates, she was the quiet one. To the instructors, she was efficient but difficult to read. To Colonel Victor Harlan, the military liaison who controlled the hospital's veteran placement contracts, she was a problem that had survived too many attempts to be dismissed. He had disliked her from the first day she corrected medication chart before a resident signed it. He disliked her even more after she warned that the hospital's new triage protocol was missing a step for patients transferred from secure military facilities. "You keep speaking like you've run a field hospital," Harlan had told her. Evelyn had lowered her eyes and said, "No, sir. I speak like someone who has seen mistakes travel faster than ambulances." That answer had followed her for months. Now, as families gathered and cameras lifted, Evelyn stood near the back of the graduate line with her hands folded. She was not smiling, but she was trying. Her hair was pinned neatly. Her white coat still held the crease from the plastic cover. On her left wrist, hidden beneath the sleeve, was a thin scar she never explained and a worn elastic band she touched whenever she needed to stay calm. Dr. Lila Moreno, the ER surgeon, who had supervised Evelyn's final clinical rotation, leaned close as she passed. "You earned this," Lila whispered. Evelyn nodded once. Then she saw the chart. It sat on a rolling stand just inside the ER doors, half covered by a blue folder. The patient's name was unfamiliar, but the transfer note was not. Evelyn recognized the abbreviation before she could stop herself from reacting. Sable transfer, delayed response risk, do not move without command clearance. Her body became still. No one else saw it. The graduates were adjusting collars. Parents were opening camera apps. Colonel Harlan stepped up to the temporary podium and cleared his throat. "Today," he announced, "we honor discipline, humility, and the chain of trust." Evelyn's eyes remained on the chart. Beside it, under her own name card, something else waited. A sealed file, thin but official. its brown cover stamped with the hospital crest and a smaller black insignia she had not seen in 12 years. A single word had been printed across the label. Restored. Her fingers went cold. She had not requested restoration. She had not appealed. She had signed papers agreeing never to discuss the missing years. She had let people believe what they needed to believe, because silence had protected a young medic whose life had already been torn apart by one terrible night. Harlan's speech continued. Evelyn stepped out of line. A few heads turned. She moved toward the ER doors, not quickly enough to cause panic, but with purpose. Dr. Moreno noticed first. Evelyn, she asked. Evelyn reached the rolling stand and looked down at the transfer note. The patient had been cleared for movement to imaging, but the old code on the page told another story. Stable transfer patients needed a second check after transport. If they were moved too soon, the problem would not look dramatic at first. It would look like confusion, fatigue, ordinary stress. Then the window would close. Evelyn lifted the chart. A hand caught her wrist. Colonel Harlan had left the podium. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his voice low enough for only the nearest row to hear. "This patient cannot go to imaging yet," Evelyn said. "You are not on duty. The note says delayed response risk. You are a graduate waiting to be pinned, not a physician, not a commander, and not authorized to interfere with an active transfer." Dr. Moreno approached. "Colonel, what is happening?" "She is creating a scene," Harlan said, louder now. "At her own graduation." Evelyn kept her voice steady. "Please call the attending before transport." A young nurse near the doors hesitated beside a wheelchair. Harlan saw the hesitation and flushed. He took the chart from Evelyn's hands and snapped it shut. "This is exactly why I argued against her certification." The corridor quieted. Evelyn felt every face turn. A graduate named Jenna Price, barely 23, and holding a bouquet from her mother, whispered, "What did she do?" Harlan heard it and smiled without warmth. "What she always does," he said. "She mistakes suspicion for expertise." Evelyn looked at him, and in that moment she understood. This was not about a chart anymore. He had been waiting for a public moment. He wanted witnesses. He wanted her corrected in front of everyone who had applauded her name. "Searching for a second review," she said. "You are demanding authority you do not possess." "No, I am recognizing a code." Harlan's expression changed for half a second. "What code?" Evelyn said nothing. The word "Sable" seemed to burn behind her eyes. Harlan turned to the graduates and families. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive the interruption. Sometimes a person reaches the end of training without understanding the first rule of medical service. Know your place." A few uncomfortable laughs rose, then faded. He held out his hand. "Your badge." Dr. Moreno stepped in. "Colonel, this is not the setting." "It is exactly the setting," he said. "This program represents the United States Military Medical Partnership. We cannot pin a nurse who disrupts command procedure based on imaginary credentials." Evelyn did not move. Harlan stepped closer. "Your badge." Nurse Shaw, slowly. Evelyn Uen clipped the temporary graduate badge from her coat and placed it in his palm. He lifted it between two fingers. "You're fired." The words traveled down the corridor, sharp and final. Someone laughed. Then another person, nervous and eager not to be the only one silent. The laughter spread just enough to become a wound. Evelyn stood still. She had survived worse sounds, sirens, static, names read into darkness, but laughter at graduation, in a white coat she had earned without using the past as a shield, touched something she had not prepared herself to lose. Harlan dropped her badge onto the table. "Escort her out." No one moved, not at first. Then the ER doors opened behind Evelyn, and the young nurse with the wheelchair said, Dr. Moreno, the transfer patient is asking for someone named Nightingale 6. The corridor fell silent. Evelyn closed her eyes. Colonel Harlan looked at the sealed file under her name card. For the first time that morning, his confidence cracked. Dr. Lila Moreno had learned to recognize two kinds of silence in a hospital. There was the silence of fear, when everyone waited for someone else to make a decision. And there was the silence of recognition, when the room realized the wrong person had just been humiliated. This silence was the second kind. The young nurse at the ER doors looked frightened by what she had said. "I'm sorry," she added. The patient kept repeating it. "Nightingale 6, I thought maybe it was a medication or a contact." Colonel Harlan's jaw tightened. "It is nothing." Evelyn opened her eyes. "Where is the patient?" "Room 3, the nurse said. He became confused during transport prep. I need to see him." "You need to leave," Harlan snapped. Dr. Moreno turned to him. "Colonel, if the patient is using a code connected to his transfer note, I need to evaluate that." "It is not a code. You just asked her what code." Harlan looked at Lila sharply, but the surgeon did not step back. She was younger than him by 15 years, shorter by half a foot, and completely unwilling to be intimidated in her own ER corridor. "The ceremony can wait," Lila said. "The ceremony represents federal partnership," Harlan replied. "It does not wait because a dismissed graduate wants to feel important." Evelyn finally spoke. "I don't want importance." Everyone heard the exhaustion in her voice. Harlan turned to the audience. "You see, this is how false humility operates. First the disruption, then the noble tone, then the secret hint that only she understands." Evelyn's hand curled around the elastic band at her wrist. Jenna Price stepped out from the graduate line. "Sir, what if she's right?" It was a small question, but it cut through the corridor. Harlan looked at Jenna as if she had betrayed the uniform before even wearing it. "Return to your place, Nurse Price." Jenna flushed, but she did not move back. Dr. Moreno took the chart from the stand and opened it. Her eyes scanned the transfer note. She did not understand all of it, but she understood enough to know Evelyn had not invented what she saw. "Sabo transfer," Lila read softly. "Delayed response risk. Clearance pending." She looked toward Harlan. "Why was this mark ready for imaging?" "That is not your concern during a graduation ceremony." "It is absolutely my concern if the patient is in my ER." Harlan's face hardened. "Doctor, you are crossing into administrative command, and you are standing between my team and a patient." The families in the chairs shifted. The graduates stopped whispering. For the first time, the humiliation was no longer entertainment. It was obstruction. Evelyn used the moment to move toward room 3. Harlan caught her sleeve. This time, the corridor did not laugh. "Do not touch me again," Evelyn said quietly. There was no threat in her tone, only a boundary so old and firm that even Harlan's fingers loosened before he understood why. She entered the ER with Dr. Moreno beside her. Room 3 held an older man in a transport gown, his hair silver, his face pale with effort. He gripped the bed rail and stared at the ceiling, as if listening to something beyond the hospital walls. A resident stood nearby with a tablet. He was stable, then started repeating the phrase, "Vitals are not alarming, but he's disoriented." Evelyn approached the bed slowly. The man's eyes moved to her face. For a moment, he seemed to look through her age, through the white coat, through the graduation ribbon. His lips trembled. "Nightingale sick?" he whispered. Evelyn leaned closer. "Who gave you that name?" His hand lifted, shaking, and pointed not at her, but at the hallway. "File," he said. "They said, restored." Evelyn's breath caught. Dr. Moreno looked at her. "Evelyn, The patient tried to sit up. Evelyn placed a steady hand near his shoulder, guiding him back without force. "Stay with my voice," she said. "You're at St. Anselm. You're safe. No transport yet." His breathing slowed. Dr. Moreno watched the change. "What did you just do?" "Reduce stimulation. He is responding to memory cues." That looked practiced. Evelyn did not answer. The resident checked the monitor and frowned. "His numbers are improving." From the doorway, Colonel Harlan said, "Coincidence?" No one had heard him enter. Evelyn did not look at him. "He should remain here until command clearance is verified." Harlan laughed once. It was not a happy sound. "Command clearance? From a woman I just terminated." The patient's eyes snapped toward him. "Terminated?" The old man whispered. Harlan stepped into the room. "Sir, you are confused." The patient's hand tightened around the rail. "Not her." Evelyn swallowed. "Please don't speak." "Not her," he repeated. "She stayed." The room changed again. Dr. Moreno's gaze moved from the patient to Evelyn. "Stayed where? Stayed when? Stayed with whom?" Harlan recovered quickly. "This patient is not a credible witness in his current state." Evelyn turned then. "Do not use his condition to erase what he knows. And do not use a vulnerable patient to repair your reputation." That struck. Evelyn's face did not change, but Dr. Moreno saw the pain behind the stillness. Before anyone could speak, a hospital clerk appeared outside room 3, holding the sealed file from the graduation table. "Dr. Moreno," she said, "this was under Nurse Shaw's card. Security asked me to bring it because it has an urgent command seal." Harlan moved fast. "Give it to me." The clerk hesitated. Dr. Moreno stepped between them. "Give it to me. It is administrative property," Harlan said. Lila looked at the label. "It says Medical Restoration Review." Harlan's voice dropped. Dr. Evelyn backed away from the bed. "Do not open it." Every eye turned to her. That was the wrong thing to say, and she knew it as soon as the words left her mouth. It made the file more important. It made her fear visible. It gave Harlan a weapon. He smiled. "You heard her," he said. "She knows what is inside, Doctor." Moreno held the file but did not break the seal. "Evelyn, why shouldn't I open it?" Evelyn looked at the patient. His eyes were fixed on her with a grief she recognized. "Because some records were sealed to protect people who had already paid enough." Harlan pounced. "Or to hide misconduct." The old man made a low sound of protest. Evelyn turned back to him. "Please, save your strength, Doctor." Moreno looked at the file again. "This seal is not from our hospital." "No," Evelyn said. "Where is it from?" Evelyn did not answer. Harlan did not answer. Harlan did. "Probably nowhere legitimate." The clerk, still standing in the doorway, looked down at the file. "Sir, the courier log says it came from Fort Reading Command Archive." Harlan froze. Jenna Price, who had followed at a distance and now stood near the hallway, whispered, "Command Archive?" The patient in room 3 closed his eyes and said one more phrase. "Ask General Ardell." Evelyn went completely still. Colonel Harlan stared at her, and for the first time his anger carried something like fear. Dr. Moreno saw it. "You know that name?" she said to Evelyn. Evelyn's voice was barely audible. "I knew his son." The file in Lila's hand suddenly felt heavier. Behind them, in the corridor where the graduation chair still waited, a phone began ringing at the temporary podium. No one answered it until the clerk hurried over and lifted the receiver. Her voice carried through the open ER doors. "Yes, sir. Yes, the ceremony is still in progress." She looked toward Evelyn, then toward Harlan. "It's the general's office," the clerk said. "They're asking if Evelyn Shaw is present." The graduation guests had begun to stand. Some rose because they wanted a better view. Others rose because shame made sitting feel wrong. The laughter from earlier seemed to hang in the corridor like smoke. No one wanted to breathe anymore. Colonel Harlan stepped out of room 3 with the controlled expression of a man trying to put a broken mask back onto his face. "The ceremony will resume," he announced. "Dr. Moreno, return the file. Nurse Shaw will wait in the administrative office until her status is clarified." Evelyn looked toward the ER exit. "The patient still needs command clearance." "Enough." Dr. Moreno folded her arms around the sealed file. "You are not taking her anywhere alone." Harlan's eyes flashed. "Doctor, do not confuse temporary confusion for vindication." A patient mumbled an old phrase. A file arrived without context. That does not change the fact that Evelyn Shaw disrupted a formal ceremony and interfered with an authorized transfer. Jenna Price stepped forward again. It also doesn't change the fact that she was right. Harlan turned on her. "You are a graduate candidate. Then might be. I should learn from the person who noticed the danger." A murmur moved through the graduates. Evelyn looked at Jenna with a warning in her eyes. "Do not risk yourself for me." But Jenna's chin lifted. She had watched Evelyn all semester, watched her stay late to explain procedures to students too embarrassed to ask, watched her clean rooms without complaint when orderlies were short, watched her give credit to residents who had ignored her until they needed help. "You laughed," Jenna said, turning to the row of graduates behind her. No one answered. One young man looked at his shoes. Another lowered the bouquet he had been holding like a trophy. Harlan slapped the podium once. "This ceremony is not a courtroom." "No," Dr. Moreno said. "But you turned it into one when you fired her publicly." The words landed hard. Evelyn moved toward the sealed file. "Lila, please." Dr. Moreno held it away gently. "I need to understand." "You don't." "I do. If the general's office is calling." At the podium, the clerk covered the phone. "They are requesting confirmation that Nurse Shaw has not left the premises." Harlan reached for the receiver. "I will handle command communication." The clerk did not immediately release it. That tiny hesitation humiliated him more than an argument could have. He took the phone anyway. "This is Colonel Victor Harlan, medical liaison." "Yes, General Ardell might contact me directly." He listened. His posture stiffened. "Yes, sir. But there has been a disciplinary incident." He listened again. "No, sir, she has not been pinned." A long pause. The corridor watched his face lose color. Finally he said, "Understood," and set the receiver down with unnecessary care. Dr. Moreno asked, "What did they say?" Harlan adjusted his cuffs. "The general is en route." The words moved through the corridor like an electric current. Evelyn closed her eyes. Jenna whispered, "Why would a general come to a nurse graduation?" No one answered. Harlan looked at Evelyn. "What have you done?" She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because after 12 years of silence, after a demotion that was never officially called a demotion, after a record that had disappeared so cleanly that civilian employers thought she had invented half her life, the first question was still an accusation. "I came to graduate," she said. "You expect us to believe that?" "I expected nothing." That was true. She had not expected honor. She had not expected a sealed file under her name. She had expected a small pin, a certificate, maybe a quiet photograph she would never frame. She had planned to go home after the ceremony, place the certificate in a drawer beside letters she never mailed, and return to work the next morning as if nothing in her past mattered. But the past had found the corridor. Dr. Moreno looked at the file. "Evelyn, I won't open this without you standing here. Harlan snorted. How considerate. Lila ignored him. But I also won't let him bury it. Evelyn looked through the glass into room 3. The patient had come. A nurse was monitoring him. He was safe for the moment. Then she looked at the graduates. Young faces, some ashamed, some curious, some still defensive because admitting they had laughed at cruelty would require them to become different people before lunch. Her gaze stopped on Jenna. The young nurse had tears in her eyes, but she stood straight. Evelyn remembered another young medic standing straight 12 years ago, hands shaking, uniform dusty, waiting for blame he did not deserve. His name had been Caleb Ross. He had been 19. He had made one wrong call in a field corridor filled with smoke and alarms. But the wrong call had happened only because Evelyn had given him an order she could not explain afterward. She had taken responsibility. The report had sealed her record. Caleb had kept his career, his mind, and eventually his life because she had signed away her own. She had never regretted it, but she had also never stopped hearing him say, "Ma'am, tell them it was me." A new voice came from the side entrance. She won't. Everyone turned. A man in a dark service uniform stood near the security desk, holding a leather document case against his chest. His hair was cropped close, his face older than it should have been, and his eyes had the haunted steadiness of someone who had survived by remembering exactly who saved him. Evelyn whispered, "Caleb." Sergeant First Class Caleb Ross stopped 3 steps from her. For a moment, the corridor saw not a stranger and a nurse, but 2 people standing on either side of a memory too heavy to speak aloud. Harlan recovered first. "Identify yourself." Caleb opened his document case. "Sergeant First Class Caleb Ross, Fort Reading Command Archive Courier. I was instructed to deliver supplementary records to General Ardell in person." Harlan pointed to the sealed file. "That file is already in hospital custody." "No, sir," Caleb said. "That is the notice." He lifted a thicker folder from the case. "This is the record." The corridor went silent again. Evelyn took 1 step back, as if the folder were not paper but fire. Caleb's voice softened. "I'm sorry, ma'am." He ordered the review. "I couldn't stop it." Her eyes filled, but she did not let tears fall. "You should have stayed away," she said. "I did for 12 years. Harlan looked between them. "So there was a conspiracy." Caleb turned to him slowly. "There was a rescue." The word changed the air. Dr. Moreno held the sealed notice against her chest. Jenna covered her mouth. Evelyn shook her head. "Caleb, don't." He looked at her with a grief that had matured into resolve. "You protected me when I was a kid," he said. "You don't get to protect all of us from the truth forever." The record folder bore a black insignia, the same one on the sealed notice. Beneath it, typed in formal letters, was a name the corridor had not yet earned the right to understand. Shaw, Evelyn M. Call sign. Nightingale 6, status, record, restoration, pending command presence. Harlan stared at the words, "Not restored." Caleb looked toward the main entrance as distant sirens announced an arriving escort. "No, sir," he said. "Pending witness." Evelyn knew then that running would only turn truth into spectacle without mercy. She looked at the young graduates, the families, the ER staff, the patient room, the file, the man she had saved, and the colonel who had laughed while trying to erase her. "What does the general know?" she asked Caleb. Caleb's answer was quiet. "Everything you left out." The hospital's front doors opened with a rush of outside noise. No general entered yet. Only security officers moving into position. But every person in the corridor understood that the morning had crossed the line. A graduation had become a reckoning, and the woman without a badge was the only one who looked as if she wished it had never begun. Colonel Harlan ordered the graduates back into formation. but no one obeyed quickly. That delay told him more than any direct rebellion could have. Authority was still his, technically. The podium still bore his notes. The program still listed his name above Dr. Moreno's. He could still end scholarships, delay placements, and write evaluations that followed young nurses into their first jobs. But the invisible thing he had relied on, the room's willingness to believe him without question, had started to collapse. "Return to your seats," he said. A few families sat. The graduates remained standing. Evelyn looked at Jenna. "Please don't make yourself a target." Jenna wiped her cheek. "You were one, and you still warned them about the patient. That is different." "How?" Evelyn had no answer that would not sound like surrender. Caleb placed the thick record folder on the table beside the abandoned graduation pins. Its presence transformed the table. A moment earlier, it had represented achievement, ceremony, clean beginnings. Now it held proof that beginnings could be stolen and names could be buried. Dr. Moreno lowered her voice. "Evelyn, I need you to tell me what I'm standing in the middle of." Evelyn looked at the ER doors. 12 years ago, she began, then stopped. Her throat closed around the memory. Harlan seized the pause. "Convenient." Caleb stepped forward, anger sharpening his face. "Careful. Do not threaten me, Sergeant. I am advising you." Evelyn touched Caleb's sleeve. "No." He stepped back, but only because she asked. She took a breath. 12 years ago, there was a medical evacuation at a forward stabilization site attached to Fort Reading operations. The official report said a junior medic misread a movement order. Caleb looked down. Evelyn continued. "That report was incomplete." Dr. Moreno's voice was gentle. "Why? Because I made it incomplete?" Harlan pointed toward her as if she had confessed. "There." But no one followed him. Evelyn kept going. A civilian translator's family had been brought into the site under temporary protection. Their names were not supposed to enter standard logs. If they had, people outside the base could have found them. The corridor listened without breathing. There was confusion during an evacuation. The safest route changed. Caleb, Sergeant Ross, was a new medic then. He carried out the last order he received. "The order came from me," Caleb said. "I should have questioned it. You were 19. I still should have." Evelyn's eyes hardened with old pain. "And I was your commanding nurse." Harlan's head lifted. "Commanding?" No one looked at him. Evelyn said afterward, "Command needed a report that protected the family's identities and the classified route. I accepted responsibility for the delay and signed a statement saying I had acted outside documented authority." Dr. Moreno looked horrified. "You let them erase your service? It was not supposed to be permanent." Caleb laughed once bitterly, but it became useful. That sentence made Harlan shift. Evelyn saw it. So did Dr. Moreno. "What does that mean?" Lila asked. Caleb opened the leather case again and removed a thin internal memo. When the civilian transition program at St. Anselm requested verification of Evelyn Shaw's prior service, the archive returned an incomplete file. It showed disciplinary restriction, but not the sealed operational reason. Someone here used that gap to label her records suspicious. Harlan's voice was controlled. "Mind your implication." Caleb looked at him. "I'm reading the memo. That memo is not authorized for public review. Neither was firing her in public." A murmur rose. This time it was not shock. It was agreement. Evelyn placed a hand on the folder. "Stop, all of you," Dr. Moreno asked. "Why?" "Because this is not just my name." Caleb's expression softened. "The family is safe. Their identities remain sealed." The general confirmed it. Evelyn shook her head. "There are still people who live because no one spoke, and one person who disappeared because no one spoke," Caleb said. The word struck her harder than Harlan's firing. She looked away. In the front row, an older woman who had come to watch her daughter graduate stood slowly. "Nurse Shaw," she said. uncertainly. Did you lose your career protecting someone? Evelyn did not answer. She did not need to. The woman's face changed. She looked at the graduates, then at Harlan. And you laughed at her. No one laughed now. Harlan stepped back to the podium. This emotional display is exactly why formal review exists. We do not rewrite records based on sentiment. Dr. Moreno held up the sealed notice. Then let's wait for the formal reviewer. He is not here yet. No, but he is coming. Harlan leaned close to Lila. You are jeopardizing your department. Lila did not lower her voice. Its job is to recognize danger before pride turns it into tragedy. The line drew a quiet reaction from the staff. Several nurses nodded. A resident who had stood frozen near room 3 finally walked to the chart stand and wrote a note delaying transport pending review. It was a small act. It mattered. Harlan saw control slipping and reached for the one weapon he still believed would work. Shame. Ask her, he said to the corridor. Ask why, if she is so honorable, she entered this program as a civilian without disclosing a command title. Ask why she never corrected the record. Ask why she accepted your friendship, your trust, your admiration. While hiding behind silence, Evelyn flinched. The accusation was cruel because part of it was true. She had hidden, not to deceive, but because hidden was how she had survived. Hidden was how she had kept Caleb from reopening wounds. Hidden was how she had avoided the question she feared most. If she had done the right thing, why did it still feel like punishment? Jenna stepped forward. Might be because people like you punish truth before you understand it. Harlan's face went red. Enough from you. No, Evelyn said. The word surprised everyone, including herself. She turned to Jenna. Do not become cruel on my behalf. Jenna's anger broke into confusion. Evelyn looked at the graduates. If you become nurses, you will be tempted to decide who deserves dignity based on how much you know. Most people arrive with missing pages. Some missing pages are mistake, some are grief, some are service they are not allowed to name. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. You laughed because a powerful man gave you permission. Learn from that before you wear the pin. The graduates lowered their eyes. Even Harlan had no immediate answer. Then the phone on the podium rang again. The clerk answered, listened, and turned toward the main entrance. General Ardell's convoy is at the gate. Caleb closed the document case. Dr. Moreno broke the seal on the thin notice at last. Carefully, in full view of Evelyn, she unfolded the paper, read the first lines, and her face changed. What does it say? Jenna asked. Lila looked at Evelyn, then at Harlan. It says Colonel Harlan was notified 3 weeks ago that Nurse Shaw's service record was under restoration review. The corridor reacted all at once. Harlan's mouth opened, but no sound came. Evelyn stared at him. 3 weeks, he had known there was a review. Maybe not the truth, not all of it, but enough to wait, not to avoid public judgment, enough to not fire her at graduation as if humiliation were policy. You knew? Dr. Moreno asked. Harlan recovered with effort. I knew there was an inquiry. I did not know its merits, but you fired her before the general arrived, Caleb said. Harlan looked toward the entrance, where security officers straightened. The first black vehicle appeared beyond the glass. Evelyn felt the past gather around her like a storm, and for the first time, she was not sure silence would protect anyone anymore. General Thomas Ardell did not enter the hospital like a man seeking attention. That made the attention worse. He came through the main doors in dress uniform, accompanied by 2 aides and the hospital director, who looked as if he had aged 10 years between the parking lot and the corridor. The general was tall, silver-haired, and unsmiling. His left hand held a flat archival case. His right hand carried no phone, no notes, no visible urgency. He moved with the calm of someone who understood that real authority did not need to hurry in order to change a room. Every graduate straightened. Every family member fell silent. Colonel Harlan stepped forward with a salute. General Ardell. The general did not return it immediately. That small refusal was seen by everyone. Harlan's hand remained at his brow for one breath too long before he lowered it. General Ardell looked past him. His eyes found Evelyn. She stood without a badge, without a pin, without the certificate she had waited months to receive. Her white coat looked painfully plain beneath the fluorescent lights. She did not salute. She did not move. Her hands were folded in front of her the way they had been before everything broke open. The general's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. Recognition, regret, a grief old enough to have discipline around it. Shaw, he said. Evelyn swallowed. General. Harlan inserted himself between them. Sir, before any action is taken, I must report that Ms. Shaw disrupted a live medical transfer, refused chain instruction, and created confusion during a formal graduation ceremony. General Ardell looked at him. Were you asked to report first, Colonel? No, sir, but then wait. The word was quiet. Harlan stepped back. Dr. Moreno looked at Evelyn as if seeing the shape of her burden more clearly now. Caleb stood beside the table, rigid, eyes forward. General Ardell turned to him. Sergeant Ross, sir, you brought the record? Ye, sir, and the notice? Dr. Moreno lifted it. Here, General. He accepted it with a nod. Dr. Moreno, yes, sir. I'm told your department delayed an unsafe transfer. We delayed a transfer after Nurse Shaw identified a wrist code, sir. The general looked at Harlan. Was that before or after she was fired? Moreno did not soften the answer. Before, sir. The hospital director closed his eyes briefly. Harlan said, Sir, the wrist code was not recognized by current civilian protocol. No, the general said. It would not be. He placed the archival case on the table and opened it. Inside lay several protected documents. A cloth patch sealed in plastic, and a small metal tag worn smooth at the edges. Evelyn stared at the tag. Her hand rose halfway, then fell. General Ardell noticed. I apologize, he said to her. Those two words stunned the corridor more than any accusation could have. Evelyn shook her head. Please don't. I should have done it years ago. Holland's patience cracked. I see her. With respect, this is irregular. If there is a restoration review, it should occur in private. General Ardell looked around the corridor, at the rows of chairs, the graduates, the families, the ER staff, the badge lying on the table like discarded evidence. Was her dismissal private? No one answered. The general turned back to Harlan. Then, the correction will not be hidden for your comfort. The words settled over the corridor with finality. He lifted the cloth patch from the archival case. It showed a faded nightbird stitched over a field cross, the edges worn from use. A whisper moved through the older veterans seated among the families. Nightingale unit, one man said. Evelyn closed her eyes. Dr. Moreno heard the whisper and looked at the patch. That was real? Caleb said. Ma'am. Harlan tried one last time. A patch does not establish prison credential. No, General Ardell said. But the record does. He opened the folder Caleb had brought and removed a document with several blacked out lines. He did not read the classified portions. He did not expose the names Evelyn had protected. He read only what the room needed to know. Evelyn May Shaw, former commissioned field trauma nurse attached to Fort Reading Medical Operations, temporary command designation, Nightingale 6. 12 years ago, during a protected evacuation, she assumed responsibility for an undocumented route change. in order to preserve civilian identities and prevent further compromise. Evelyn looked down. The general continued. Initial disciplinary restriction was entered without full operational context due to classification. Subsequent failure to restore the complete record resulted in loss of veteran status recognition, delayed credential verification, and repeated professional harm. The hospital director whispered, "My God." General Ardell turned a page. Restoration review initiated after new archive evidence and witness statements from Sergeant First Class Caleb Ross, Dr. Miriam Vale, and retired command staff. Harlan seized on one phrase. "Witness statements can be contested." The general looked at him. They were. Harlan's confidence returned for half a second. "By whom?" General Ardell lifted the thin notice Dr. Moreno had opened. "By you." The corridor seemed to shrink around Harlan. He did not deny it quickly enough. The general continued. 3 weeks ago, your office received notice that Miss Shaw's record was under correction and that no adverse credential action should be taken until command review. You responded that immediate dismissal was necessary because her presence caused reputational instability for the program. Moreno's face hardened. Reputational instability. Jenna looked sick. Harlan's voice became defensive. "Sir, I acted to protect institutional standards. You acted before the truth could embarrass you," General Ardell said. Harlan's mouth closed. Evelyn touched the edge of the table. "General, please. This doesn't need to become punishment." He looked at her sadly. "Still protecting people from consequences. Consequences are not the same as justice." "No," he said. "But neither is silence." That struck her. The general lifted the small metal tag from the case. "Do you remember this?" Evelyn's composure finally broke at the edges. "Yeah." Caleb turned away, his eyes wet. General Ardell held the tag carefully. It belonged to Lieutenant Daniel Ardell. The name moved through the corridor before anyone understood it. "My son," the general said. Evelyn's voice came out rough. "He told me not to wait. I know. I couldn't move him first. I know. He made me promise the others would leave." The general's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I know." The room understood then that the secret was not some grand deception. It was grief arranged into paperwork. It was a woman carrying a command decision no one had thanked her for because no one had been allowed to know. Evelyn shook her head. "I did not save him." "No," General Ardell said. "You obeyed him. Then you saved everyone he ordered you to save. For 12 years, I blamed the fog of that report because I did not have the courage to ask why my son trusted you with his last order." The corridor was utterly silent. Harlan looked trapped, but even he seemed to understand that the ground beneath the morning had changed beyond repair. Dr. Moreno wiped her cheek quickly. Jenna stood motionless, bouquet hanging at her side. General Ardell placed the tag back in the case. "When the archive was reopened, I found your statement. You removed his name from the operational sequence to protect the classified evacuation route. You removed the family. You removed Sergeant Ross. You removed everyone except yourself." Evelyn whispered. "That was the order." "No," he said. "That was the sacrifice." She looked at him then, and in her eyes was the terrible fatigue of someone who had not allowed herself to hear that word. Harlan tried to speak. General Ardell did not turn. "Not here." The hospital director stepped forward quickly. "General St. Anselm will fully cooperate." "Yes," Ardell said. "It will." Then he looked at the badge lying on the table. "Who removed that?" No one answered. Finally, Harlan said, "I did, sir." "Pick it up." Harlan stared. The general waited. Slowly, Colonel Harlan picked up Evelyn's temporary graduate badge. His fingers, so theatrical earlier, now looked clumsy around the cheap plastic card. "Return it," the general said. Harlan turned toward Evelyn. The coroner watched. He held out the badge. Evelyn did not take it. For one painful second, everyone thought she refused out of pride. But her face showed something else. She was not rejecting the badge. She was afraid of what accepting it meant. If she took it, the hidden years would become real again. The old name would live in public. Caleb's guilt would stand in light. Daniel Ardell's last order would no longer belong only to the few who carried it. The woman who had survived by being ordinary would have to become visible. Dr. Moreno stepped beside her. "You don't have to carry it alone now," Jenna whispered. "Please." Caleb said nothing, but he looked at her like the 19-year-old she had saved. Evelyn lifted her hand and took the badge. No applause came. The silence was better. It had respect in it. Then the patient in room 3 called weakly from beyond the doors, "Nightingale 6. Evelyn turned immediately. Duty moved through her before memory could stop it. Dr. Moreno nodded. "Go." Harlan looked startled. "The ceremony." General Ardell cut him off. "Can wait." Evelyn went back into the ER. This time, no one tried to stop her. By late afternoon, the graduation corridor had been rearranged 3 times, and still looked like a place where a storm had passed through. The folding chairs were crooked. Programs lay abandoned under seats. A vase of flowers had tipped near the wall and been rescued by a volunteer who kept apologizing, though no one blamed her. The podium had been moved away from the ER doors after Dr. Moreno said she refused to have ceremony traffic interfering with patient care again. The graduates waited in the teaching wing, quieter now. Their white coats no longer costumes of achievement, but reminders of responsibility. Evelyn spent 40 minutes in room 3 with Dr. Moreno and the attending team. The patient stabilized. The transfer was delayed, reviewed, and safely rescheduled. Nothing dramatic happened after the warning was obeyed. That was the point of warnings. When they worked, they looked unnecessary to people who wanted spectacle. When Evelyn finally stepped back into the corridor, the room did not burst into applause. No one dared. She preferred that. General Ardell stood near the table with Caleb and the hospital director. Colonel Harlan had been removed from the ceremony space pending formal review, though not before offering Evelyn an apology so stiff and legal that it sounded less like remorse than fear. Evelyn accepted it with a nod. Not because he deserved peace, but because she refused to spend the rest of the day feeding his shame with her attention. Jenna approached slowly. "Nurse Shaw?" Evelyn turned. "Yes." "I'm sorry I laughed." Evelyn studied her face. "Were you laughing because it was funny?" Jenna shook her head quickly. "No, I was nervous. Everyone else." She stopped. Evelyn waited. "Nah, tried again." "I laughed because I didn't want to be the only one who didn't." Evelyn's expression softened with sadness. "That is how cruelty recruits good people." Jenna's eyes filled. "I don't want to be that kind of nurse." "Then remember how it felt when you realized you had joined the wrong side of a moment." Jenna nodded, crying openly now. "I will." Evelyn touched her shoulder. "And remember that apology means very little unless it changes your next choice." Behind them, several graduates had gathered close enough to hear. No one defended themselves. No one asked to be comforted. That too was a beginning. Dr. Moreno came out of the ER, removing gloves and speaking to a resident. When she saw Evelyn, she crossed the corridor. "The patient is stable and asking if you outshrank everyone." Evelyn almost smiled. "Tell him no." "I did." He said that was not his memory. Caleb laughed softly for the first time all day. The sound released something in Evelyn's chest and tightened it at the same time. General Ardell approached with the archival case. "Mims Shaw, may we speak?" Evelyn nodded. They moved a few steps away, near a wall lined with framed photographs of past graduating classes. Faces smiled from years that had never known this corridor. Beneath one frame, a brass plaque read, "Service is remembering what others forget." The general looked at the plaque for a long moment. My son wrote that for a leadership essay, he said. Evelyn looked up sharply. I didn't know. He was very proud of it. He was also very bad at taking advice from his father. A fragile silence passed between them. He was kind, Evelyn said. The general's eyes shone. He was stubborn. That too. They both smiled faintly, and the sadness inside it was cleaner than grief had been before. General Ardell opened the case and removed a formal document. Your record has been restored, effective this morning. The full classified annex remains sealed. The public correction states that prior disciplinary restrictions were incomplete and should not be used to challenge your service, credentials, or veteran status. Evelyn did not reach for it. General, I built a life without that. I know. I don't need rank. I'm not offering rank. He held the document toward her. I'm returning your name. The words undid her more than the file, more than the badge, more than the public humiliation. Rank could be argued. Medals could be displayed or hidden. But a name, once removed from records, once spoken only in guarded rooms, was the shape of life left behind. She accepted the document with both hands. Thank you. No, he said. Thank you. She looked down, uncomfortable with the weight of gratitude. The general lowered his voice. There is more. Evelyn's shoulders tensed. The graduation committee intended to present an honorary service pin today. I don't want a spectacle. I know. Then don't make me one. He considered that. What would you accept? Evelyn looked toward the graduates, toward Jenna, toward Caleb, toward the ER doors where the work had continued regardless of ceremony, pride, or shame. Pin them first, she said. The general followed her gaze. They need to understand this day is not about me. What is it about? Evelyn answered without hesitation. The patient no one believes. The chart no one reads twice. The quiet warning that sounds inconvenient until it saves someone. The person everyone laughs at because laughing is easier than listening. General Ardell nodded slowly. Man after them. She looked at him. Weary, he said. You earned your pin too. Her hand closed around the restored record. I earned it as Evelyn Shaw, she said. Not as Nightingale 6. The general's voice softened. They are not enemies. She had no answer. For 12 years, she had divided herself carefully. Evelyn Shaw was the civilian nurse who arrived early, worked quietly, and never asked for recognition. Nightingale 6 was the buried command voice that woke in emergencies. The woman who could read risks from a half-written note. The person who had made impossible choices and paid for them in silence. She had believed one had to die for the other to survive. But the corridor had seen both, and somehow, the world had not ended. The hospital director returned to the podium, looking chastened. We're ready to resume if you are. Evelyn looked at Dr. Moreno. Is the ER covered? Lila nodded. For once, yes. Caleb stepped closer. Ma'am? Evelyn gave him a warning look. Do not call me that in front of them. He smiled through wet eyes. Old habit. You outrang old habits now. No, he said. I outlived them because of you. She looked away, but not before the tears rose. The ceremony resumed without music. That had been Evelyn's request. No dramatic march, no swelling song, no attempt to turn pain into entertainment. The graduates entered quietly and stood in two lines facing the families. Dr. Moreno spoke first, not from the original script, but from the heart of the day. This morning, she said, we learned that competence is not always loud, authority is not always right, and dignity must never depend on status. Nursing begins with attention. Attention to pain, attention to detail, attention to the person others have already decided not to hear. The graduates listened as if each sentence had been written on their coats. Then the hospital director apologized publicly for allowing a personnel action to occur without proper review. He did not name Harlan again. He did not need to. Everyone knew. One by one, the graduates were called. Jenna Price received her pin with trembling hands. When Dr. Moreno fastened it to her coat, Jenna turned and looked at Evelyn before returning to the line. It was not a request for forgiveness. It was a promise to remember. Evelyn watched every pin. She clapped for each graduate. Not loudly, not theatrically, but sincerely. Some could barely meet her eyes. Others did, and nodded. That was enough for now. Then the director looked at the final card. A pause moved through the corridor. Nurse Evelyn May Shaw. No one laughed. Evelyn stepped forward. Her walk was steady, but inside she felt the weight of every version of herself that had tried to avoid this moment. The young nurse under field lights. The officer signing an incomplete report. The civilian applicant explaining gaps in her file to people who did not believe her. The older student sitting in classrooms with graduates who mistook silence for emptiness. Dr. Moreno held the pin. Her hands shook slightly. Evelyn noticed and whispered, "Steady hands, Doctor." Lila laughed once softly and pinned the emblem to Evelyn's coat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Caleb stepped back and stood at attention. Several veterans in the audience rose with him. Evelyn's eyes widened. "Don't," but they did not salute. Not yet. They waited. General Ardell moved toward the center of the corridor. Colonel Harlan was gone. The podium had been moved. The ER doors stood open behind Evelyn. The graduates stood to her left, the families to her right. The restored file lay on the table behind her, no longer hidden, no longer weaponized. The general stopped 3 feet in front of her. Evelyn shook her head almost imperceptibly. He saw it. He understood it. Then he did it anyway. General Thomas Ardell, in full dress uniform, raised his hand and saluted Evelyn Shaw first. The corridor froze, not because the gesture was complicated, because it was unmistakable. A general had saluted before she did, before the hospital director spoke, before any certificate was handed over, before rank could be debated by people who loved rules more than truth. He gave the room a language older than apology and cleaner than applause. He honored her. Evelyn did not move. For 1 second, she was back in the sealed memory, hearing Lieutenant Daniel Ardell say, "Promise me they get out." For 1 second, she was signing the report. For 1 second, she was opening job rejection letters that called her service unverifiable. For 1 second, she was standing in the same corridor that had laughed when Harlan said, "You're fired." Then the second passed. Evelyn lifted her hand and returned the salute. Caleb's face broke. Dr. Moreno covered her mouth. Jenna Price cried openly. The veterans in the audience saluted next, not all perfectly, not all with military precision, but with reverence. Some civilians placed hands over hearts. Some graduates simply stood straighter, understanding that this was not a performance but a correction. General Ardell lowered his hand only after Evelyn lowered hers. Then he turned to the room. "Let the record show," he said, "that the first salute today was not given to rank. It was given to service." No one applauded immediately. The silence held the words. Then, from room 3, beyond the ER doors, the older patient called out, voice weak but clear. "About time." The corridor broke, not into laughter at someone's pain, but into the kind of tearful laughter that releases a room from holding its breath too long. Evelyn looked down, overwhelmed. Dr. Moreno stepped beside her. "Nurse Shaw?" Evelyn wiped one tear with the back of her hand. "Dia, your badge is crooked." Evelyn looked at the plastic graduate badge Harlan had dropped, now clipped again beneath her new pin. It was crooked, for reasons no one could explain. That made her smile. "Then fix it," she said. Dr. Moreno did. The hospital director approached with the certificate, but Evelyn held up a hand. Before that, she said, turning toward the graduates, I need to say one thing. The corridor quieted. She faced the young nurses who had begun the day eager for applause and ended it carrying a lesson no classroom could have staged. You will not always know who stands in front of you, Evelyn said. You will not always know what they gave up, what they survived, or what name they used before the world renamed them. So start with respect, not because they have earned it in your eyes, because you have not earned the right to take it away. The words entered them softly, but they would not leave easily. She looked at Jenna. And when authority tells you to laugh, look closer, Jenna nodded. Evelyn accepted her certificate. No one shouted her name. The applause, when it came, rose slowly, gently, like people were afraid to bruise the moment by making it too loud. General Ardell placed the restored record in her hands. Caleb stood beside her, no longer hidden by her silence. Dr. Moreno returned to the ER after one final squeeze of Evelyn's arm, because patients still needed care and respect meant nothing if it did not return to work. By evening, the corridor was almost normal again. Almost. The chairs were gone. The podium removed. The graduates had left with families who spoke more quietly than they had arrived. Colonel Harlan's office door remained closed, a small official notice taped to the outside. The restored file had been copied into hospital credential records. Evelyn's badge had been updated before she even asked. Nurse Evelyn Shaw, veteran service verified. She stood near the ER doors, reading the words. Caleb found her there. Looks good, he said. It looks loud. He smiled. My be loud is allowed now. She shook her head, but she did not remove it. For a while, they stood without speaking. Finally, Caleb said, I should have told the truth sooner. Evelyn looked at him. You did tell it. When you were strong enough, you lost 12 years. I lived 12 years. That's not the same. No, she admitted. It isn't. He took that as the forgiveness it was, and the grief it still could not erase. General Ardell approached from the hallway, his aides waiting at a respectful distance. I'm leaving for Fort Reading tonight, he said. The full archive correction will continue. Evelyn nodded. Thank you for keeping the protected name seal. That was never in question. To me, it was. I know. He paused. You are invited to the memorial review next month. Daniel's name will be included in the restored operational record. Evelyn's breath caught. I don't know if I can stand there. You stood here. That. You were ambushed by truth, he said. Here. You were ambushed by truth. There. You might choose it. The words stayed with her. He offered his hand. She took it. This time, he did not salute. He did not need to. The gesture had already done what it came to do. After he left, Dr. Moreno returned with 2 paper cups of coffee and handed one to Evelyn. It's terrible, Lila warned. Evelyn took a sip and winced. Accurate. They leaned against the wall near the ER entrance. Lila looked at the badge. So, Nightingale 6? No. I'm Evelyn. Lila nodded. Fair. A pause. Then Evelyn added, but if a chart says Sable transfer again, listen. I will listen if a napkin says Sable transfer. It was the first real laugh of the day. Across the corridor, Jenna Price waited with her family. She seemed unsure whether to approach. Evelyn waved her over. Jenna came quickly. I just wanted to say goodbye. You are not leaving the profession after one hard lesson, are you? Jenna shook her head. No, I think I'm entering it for the first time. Evelyn studied her, then removed a plain black pen from her coat pocket. It was the pen she had used all semester, the one Jenna had borrowed during exams and returned with nervous apologies. Take this. Jenna looked startled. Your pen. It writes badly under pressure, Evelyn said. Good practice. Jenna laughed through tears and accepted it like it was a medal. Evelyn watched her go. Dr. Moreno smiled. You know she'll keep that forever. I hope she uses it. The ER doors opened. A nurse called for Dr. Moreno, then saw Evelyn and added, Nurse Shaw, we could use you too. The words were ordinary. That made them beautiful. Evelyn clipped her badge straight, touched the new pin once, and walked into the ER. Behind her, the corridor held no music, no ceremony, no grand speech, just the fading trace of a day when a woman was fired in public, laughed at by people who thought her silence meant emptiness, and then restored by a truth too patient to stay buried forever. The general had saluted her first, but Evelyn did not return to work because of the salute. She returned because someone beyond the doors needed a nurse. And this time, when she crossed into the light of the ER, everyone made room. Some honors arrived with medals, some arrived with files finally open, names finally restored, and one salute that teaches a whole room how wrong it was. Evelyn Shaw did not ask to be remembered, but she showed them that silence is not the same as shame. If this story moved you, leave your country in the comments, honor someone forgotten, and stay close for the next file.